Bella smiled at Dominic as everyone gave their gear a final check. Do you really plan to use a mortar launcher in battle? Dominic nodded and took out the shoulder-mounted tube. It takes about 10 seconds to reload, but the shot is quite effective. I have given them to the royal guards under Princess Alexis as well, so the army will have at least 10 of them when they arrive. They are excellent for breaking charges, though I can cast spells and fire pistols faster than I can shoot mortars, so they're a secondary option most of the time. The adventurers smiled at his description of artillery as a secondary option. But none of them could truly appreciate what it was like not to have to worry about running out of mana. We will have the mages open a portal in the general vicinity of the threat, as identified by the airships. We will have to walk a few kilometers, but that shouldn't be too big of an issue, as we want to identify smaller groups to ambush, and not get ourselves tied up with a large fight. Dominic instructed. The adventurers nodded, and Dominic noticed that one of them strapped a large radio pack to his back. That should have better range than the small unit that Dominic had gotten from the techno-wizards, but it did have a tall antenna, which would be easy to spot in the open. Presumably, the first priority would be to get in contact with the airships when they arrived, and get a live update on the situation so they could start placing the portals for the army. They wanted to circle the force and attack from all directions, so they would be doing a lot of walking today. The two male mages opened a portal, while Amy moved to stand beside Dominic with her pistols in hand. She might be a mage, but most spells could be cast through a magical weapon if you had the skill. Adding a spell to the mana bullets wouldn't be hard for someone of her training, and Dominic was eager to see what she could do with it. The portal opened to a wooded area with limited visibility, and the older of the mages nodded in satisfaction. There are goblins 200 meters ahead of us. I used skimming to find the right spot, so we should be on the close side of the main force. If we eliminate these, we can work our way around the army and place the beacons. He whispered. Gunslingers, we're in front. Once we engage, let the goblins start to charge, and the warriors can move to intercept. Goblins aren't too bright. They'll head straight for us instead of trying to circle if they think we're soft. Dominic replied quietly. That would also let them get the maximum number of clear shots off before the warriors were in battle. The other two gunslingers nodded, then moved into position before turning to Dominic. I don't suppose that offer of a mana pistol on credit still stands, does it? I foresee this day being hard on ammunition, even with a Create Munitions Magitech orb. One of them whispered. Dominic smiled and held out a level 6 uncommon grade mana pistol to each of them. One is less expensive than two. Let me know if you want to buy a second. I have more. He agreed. Bella giggled softly at Dominic's response. He really was the consummate businessman. He even made them feel grateful to be indebted to him for an item that would clean out their life savings. Dominic led the way through the woods until he saw the goblins, then turned to the mage who had skimmed for their location. Is this really the best spot you could find? He asked. The mage shrugged. It's just a scout group. Dominic shook his head. There were 200 goblins and 50 hobgoblins here, to their 20 adventurers. Not impossible, but if this was the size of the average scouting group, they were going to need more than one day to make their way around the army of monsters. Dominic took out one of the rare grade mana pistols he had just made, and left his other hand free to cast Arcane Blast, so he could recover mana and heal any injuries he might take. On your signal. Amy decided once the two gunslingers were back in position. All right, subtlety it is. Dominic agreed. Bee Swarm, at level 13 from his spell book, created a massive horde of stinging insects that dive-bombed the monsters with all the protective anger that they could muster. The goblins and hobgoblins began to scream and swat at the bees, a cry that would not bring reinforcements. Nobody would come running for this particular emergency. Dominic held up his free hand to count down. 3, 2, 1. He began firing his pistol and arcane blasts at the same time as fast as two pistols, while the other gunslingers joined in. With the noise of the wounded goblins, the pistols were hardly audible. But there was one small issue. The goblins were not charging at them. The bee swarm was so large and so dense that they hadn't even noticed that they were under attack by a second force. Row by row, the goblin patrol fell, until only bees remained. That spell is just plain nasty. Where did you even learn that? Amy asked. The Witch Coven gave it to me as a first meeting gift. Lovely, isn't it? The diminutive mage smiled at him. I like it. Nobody comes to the rescue when you scream that you're being stung to death by a swarm of bees. Now, we just need them to lead the way, and we can clear a path through the scouts. One of the male mages held up a rune-covered bag. I have a large storage bag if we want to distribute loot at the end of the day. Dominic looked toward the adventurers, and realized that the warriors certainly wouldn't object if they were going to get a share of the loot without fighting. All right, everyone can pass the mana cores to the mage. I know where he lives, he won't make off with your shares. Dominic instructed. It would also save some of the fights about who was trying to loot more than their share at the end of the battles. With the bees in the vanguard, the group moved forward until the mages detected another group of monsters for them to attack. This one was led by a pair of Eton mages, ogre-sized two-headed casters. One head was a warrior, the other was a mage, and they shared control. But that also meant that they were proficient both in magic and at fighting. So many goblins, Bella whispered as the group came into view. If we find out where they've been breeding them, we will have to call in an extra attack. Dominic agreed. Goblin women were rare. The species usually used captured prisoners as broodmares for litters of their offspring. Finding where they kept them was normally the priority of any extermination effort, especially when there were thousands upon thousands of the vile creatures. Again, the bees swarmed forward, but the Eton mage countered with a fireball that wiped out half the swarm before it could get to the target. Then the fight was on, with the Eton commanding a wave of hobgoblins forward to engage the gunslingers before the goblins surrounded their group. The assumption that the gunslingers were the strongest members of the team was only natural, as few commanders would put their most vulnerable members out front to start a battle against ranged attackers. The hobgoblin spears arced through the air, only to shatter against area barrier, spells cast by the mages, while the gunslingers filled the creatures with holes. The new mana pistols in Amy's hands flashed with fire as she shot, her rounds enhanced with explosion, spells that reached their target at supersonic speed, thanks to the pistols. The detonations rippled through the front rank of hobgoblins, causing them to stumble, and the row behind to run over them in their haste to engage the adventurers. The Eton mage was hurling fireballs at them now, which the mages were intercepting. But the hobgoblins were too plentiful, and they were going to make it to the front lines. Dominic created a fresh bee swarm among the goblins in the back ranks, then turned to allow the warriors to move past him and take point, using spears to halt the charge of the hobgoblins. The warriors spread out in pairs, letting them assist each other, while the gunslingers still had room to fire between them as they were encircled by the defensive ring of warriors. It was a well-practiced tactic, one that Dominic had seen from even the royal paladins when they were hunting goblins. Focus on the Etons. We will take out the green beasts. Bella instructed as Dominic blasted another pair of hobgoblins. The mages are on it. Amy shouted back as she gleefully emptied her pistols into the enemy. At level 20, with all the enhanced damage of a rare grade weapon and a firebolt spell, she was shooting fist-sized holes through her targets with every shot. And she was an excellent shot. Dominic continued his work, then cast a group stamina refresh on the warriors as they switched from spears to shorter ranged weapons. It was better to keep them as fresh as he could in the early hours of the day. A hobgoblin raised a might club over his head, ready to squash a warrior, before Dominic put an arcane blast through its forehead. The warrior kicked it over backward, and Dominic saw that there were no more hobgoblins coming. The surviving goblins were coming fast, still harassed by bees and covered in stings. But their hide was tough and the bees were still just bees. The spell scaled with increased volume, not damage. For his next few shots, Dominic added a fireball to the rounds, and 10-meter wide circles around the target were scorched clean with each hit. It was not easy on his stamina, but the charred corpses of the goblins were stacking up fast. He adjusted the output of the spell down from the full level 13, making it level 6, and found that the goblins still died just as quickly, but the mana requirement was vastly lower. That was something that he would have to remember in the future. Arcane Blast only had one setting. Yes, but every other spell, the ones he had learned the traditional way, could be set how he wanted it. The second Eton mage fell with a grunt of pain as lightning pierced its hide, leaving the remaining goblins leaderless, and easy pickings for a group of skilled adventurers. Good work, everyone. Did we take any injuries? Dominic asked as they finished the fight. Nothing major. A few scratches, not enough to slow us down, was replied. Today was a wonderful day for the big berserker. 2 major fights back to back, and he had gotten to properly fight in one while the other was all free loot. The group stamina refresh had all the warriors in an excellent mood, and even the mages were still looking well rested. All right, make sure that everything is looted before we move on. Mages, check the Eton. It's most likely to drop an item you need. Dominic ordered. Sharing cores was one thing, but items from the monster blessings tended to be personalized to the one who looted the corpse. This should be a good spot for a portal as well. If we just move a bit further back into the trees, they can assemble an army unit on location without getting into the patrol routes of the monster horde. The older of the mages suggested. Do what you need to do, and radio in, so that my wife doesn't murder me when we get home. Dominic agreed. Wiz laughed, then spoke in his best imitation of a sage tone. I see that you've adjusted well to the life of a married man. But we've only gone a kilometer and we've had 2 fights. There is no way that we're going to circle the army in one day at this rate. Dominic nodded. That's what I'm thinking as well. We might need to do what we can and then retreat for the night, to finish tomorrow morning. The army might also use our beacons as a template as they deploy. They help, but the mages back in Westover can also use the skimming technique to place portals, I assume. I'm not 100% clear on how it works, but I think it's a form of farseeing, where they send energy out to look around a specific point. Amy nodded. Exactly. The range is limited, but you send your mana out to scout an area, looking for something specific. That's why we had to arrive near a group of monsters. Looking for open grassland in a general area might have put us dozens of kilometers away. The first beacon came online only moments after the airships relayed the message that the adventurers had encountered scout groups of 100 or more goblins at a time. Alexis sighed as she read the relayed message. You know that Dominic and the gunslingers are loving this. They can kill a goblin with every shot. It's like being granted free loot while the warriors fight the real threats. She complained. Relax, we will be there soon enough. Give them a few hours to get the beacons placed, and we will be able to move with the armies. You won't be short on monsters to fight by tomorrow morning, Prince George assured her. And so they waited. But 4 hours later, when the second beacon came online just before lunch, it became clear that the adventurers were not having an easy time making the loop around the horde. Whether this was because of terrain or because they had misjudged how far out the scouts would be placed was a matter of debate between the military leaders. But the royals had very little doubt that the reason for the delay was because they were deliberately targeting monsters, instead of trying to make it to the beacon locations. They were not wrong. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a lunch break. Loot Magistrate, how is our big bag of loot looking? Dominic asked. The adventurers laughed as the mage dramatically opened the magical bag full of mana cores. If we assume an average level of 2, given the ratio of goblins to hobgoblins, I would say that we have about 3,000 levels worth of mana cores so far. Split 20 ways, that's 150 levels each. He replied. The adventurers cheered quietly at the news. Not bad loot for the morning. But how does the afternoon look on the skimming spell? Wiz asked. The other mage shrugged. Could go either way. I'm seeing quite a few Ogre Clan brutes ahead, and a large encampment of Frosthound riders. Those could be nasty fights, but they're stationed in the scouting ring, so we should eliminate them before we place the beacons to call in the army. They have the numbers to deal with them easily enough, but if they don't detect them in time, they will take heavy casualties. The brutes of the Ogre Clan were mixed blood ogres, the sort who could normally be considered demi-human, save for the fact that they were working with a barely higher than animalistic level of intelligence. They were insensible and violent, incapable of complex speech, even in the ogre tongue. Still, they were a level 10 to 15 monster, so the core values would be good, and their magic resistance wasn't as high as a full-blooded ogre. The real issue would be the Frosthound riders. The mounts were the size of a dire bear, but long-legged and much faster. Then there was the Rider, a Knoll or Yeti clan elite warrior who was formidable on his own. Couldn't it be something reasonable, like some goblin boar riders? One of the warriors sighed. There are those too, but they're on the other side, closer to where we started. The mage replied. The warrior gave him a look that said, "Then why didn't we go that way?" but refrained from saying anything. A Frosthound rider pair was close to 40 levels worth of monster cores, with a significant chance of giving someone an uncommon or rare grade item. For that reason alone, it would be worth it to pick them off one or two at a time. They ate in relative silence, broken only by the constant updates from the airships and some army units who were scouting in the distance. The scouts had all backed off from the major army camp, so they didn't draw too much attention, and so that they could search the area for additional monsters that the airships missed. They had found hundreds of them. With his lunch dishes packed away, Dominic got to his feet. Same routine as before. Brutes live up to their name, so we will start with the bees. You like the bees too much. It's definitely a complex. That has to be a war crime. Dominic laughed at the joking complaints of the adventurers. None of them actually wanted him to stop with the bees. The swarm was simply too useful as a distraction. They might only work once against a human army, but against monsters who didn't communicate with each other, they could keep the trick up all day long. Or at least until they met the Frosthound riders. Those would just kill the bees with an ice attack and get even more angry than usual. What are you going to do when the bee trick stops working? Amy asked as she checked her new pistols. Probably ask the Coven leader if she has something similar but in a snake or scorpion variety. Dominic replied with a shrug. Maybe locusts? Aren't they one of the great plagues? Amy suggested. Oh, that would be good. A locust swarm would totally block their visibility, but wouldn't stop a bullet. The two of them led the group through the woods until they smelled the signature odor of the Ogre clan camps on the wind. A combination of rancid body odor and a rotting carcass. It's almost too easy to find them. Everyone get in position. Once they realize they're being attacked, they'll be on us in seconds. Dominic instructed. The bees flowed overhead, swarming into the camp full of the brutes as if drawn to them. The panic was as immediate as it was predictable, and Dominic started firing the moment that the chaos started. 3 brutes dropped in as many seconds before the other gunslingers had even begun to fire. Then, the creatures were charging toward Dominic's position with surprising agility, faster than the warriors could even get in position. Amy giggled as she slid between a brute's feet to shoot up into the belly of the beast behind it, catching the dim-witted creature completely unawares. Then, she retreated, dodging the body of the one Dominic cut down behind her, but remained in the front lines as the warriors struggled to establish dominance. I like this plan. The bees add a nice ambience. Dominic laughed as he moved forward, inside the club swing of the nearest brute. With monstrous strength at level 13, he was more than twice as strong as his base strength, and his claws cut easily through the brute's leg muscle as he grabbed and lifted, throwing the creature over backward. Amy was nearly glowing with power as she loaded explosion spells into her pistol shots, causing fire to ripple through the fight, missing allies by half a meter or less. But that was her best spell, unlike the other mages who specialized in lightning. Chain lightning was much more ally-friendly. With their rapid rate of fire, the brutes were no longer reaching the duo, allowing them to remain on the front lines with the warriors, while Amy's reduced height allowed everyone in the middle of the formation to fire over her head with impunity. Unfortunately, the Ogre clan brutes were not the only ones who had noticed that there were intruders nearby, and the chilling howl of a Frosthound echoed through the trees, calling reinforcements to their location as the massive beast approached, sauntering through the trees at a casual walk. Frosthound Alpha, Amy whispered, audible only to Dominic. Indeed, it was far larger than Dominic had heard the creatures were supposed to be, and it had an adult male Yeti in battle armor on its back. Not a subspecies, not one of the slender-framed Yeti scouts, but a Yeti clan chief. Well, that's not good. That thing is going to eat us. Dominic agreed. Maybe shoot it a bunch of times? Amy suggested. Better than nothing. Bullets rang off the armor of the clan chief, who threw his head back and laughed. until one hit him in the bottom of the jaw and left him spitting blood. The Yeti climbed down from his mount, which snarled and snapped as it waited for a chance to bypass the brutes, who were too stupid to get out of the way. We need 4 warriors to keep the hound off us. We will take care of the barriers and the damage. The mages insisted, as the number of brutes rapidly dwindled. On it, was replied, then moved away from the group to engage the oversized beast. The Frosthound was taller at the shoulder than even the massive berserker was, close to 500 kilos by Dominic's best guess. Keeping it from doing as it pleased would not be easy, but they had cut down most of the brutes already, and if someone didn't contain it, the beast would work in tandem with its rider to eliminate them all. The clan chief roared at them, and instinctively, Dominic roared right back. The power of the 2 magical lineages scared off every small creature in the forest, but the Yeti clan chief looked pleased that someone had dared to answer his challenge. Dominic moved away from the main fight with 2 warriors at his side, but he waved them off. Finish the brutes first. There will be more riders coming, he instructed. We can't let a duke go out like that, the warrior on Dominic's right declared. Don't worry about me. I will hold him until you have the rest of the battlefield cleared. Now go. His words were much more confident than he was, but Dominic also knew that he was the only one here who could heal himself. The clan chief smirked at Dominic as the dragonkin approached. Why a creature a third of his size intended to fight him could only be put down to fearlessness or idiocy. Whichever it was, he would know soon. The Yeti stabbed his blade into a nearby tree, setting it aside until it was needed, and Dominic smiled as he put his pistol away and let his claws extend. Then the clan chief charged. Massive claws extended with magical ice as they raked through the air, while Dominic slid to the side and hurled a barrage of arcane blasts at the chest of the Yeti. Area barrier, held as a massive ice claw, crashed into it, and Dominic spun behind a tree to fire another volley of magical attacks into his opponent. Frustrated at the agile dragonkin playing hide and seek with him, the Yeti grabbed the tree in a bear hug and tore it from the ground. The fallen tree made an excellent obstacle for Dominic's smaller frame and gave him one less thing to hide behind. But he was still attacking, and blue blood began to flow through cracks in the clan chief's armor. Whatever it screamed at him was almost guaranteed to be a string of curse words, but Dominic didn't speak Yeti. Not that he needed it just to understand the level of rage he was facing. Area barrier shattered as an ice magic boulder crashed down at him from above. Dominic blocked with crossed arms and was knocked to the ground, then kicked in the stomach and sent flying. He hit a tree with a disturbing crunch that didn't sound like wood, but the next volley of arcane blast strikes dulled the pain in his back, though Dominic could feel his armor swinging freely, where the impact had torn a strap free. With a claw, he cut the breastplate from his body, leaving him in sorcerer's robes and chain mail. That would help against the claws, but the clan chief was significantly stronger than an ogre, in both body and magical strength. His armor wouldn't take much abuse from that sort of opponent. Dominic was forced to leap behind another tree as the Yeti charged again, and then dodge as ice bullets tore through the tree trunk. Area barrier came up just in time to block the next round of ice bullets, but the claws that followed them clashed with Dominic's claws, and he found himself airborne again. There was no option but to physically block the strikes, as the clan chief's claws would tear through his armor like cloth, but the brute force behind the attacks was treating him like a pinball. Not a great option when you were in a dense stand of trees. Dominic fired another round of spells at the Yeti, then got a brilliant idea. Area barrier was incorporeal, pure magic. But if he used Fieldstone Wall, it should hold up a bit better against the attacks. Dominic was wrong. So very wrong. Fieldstone Wall only gave the Yeti handfuls of boulders to coat in ice and hurl at him after it smashed the wall apart. Dominic hurled a mortar round at the Yeti, and then laughed when the round exploded the instant the creature tried to parry it. The blast rocked the forest and shredded much of the creature's face. Not as effective as it was against humans, but a definite improvement on the magical attacks, which the clan chief appeared to have a strong resistance to. Howling came first from the west, and then weakly from nearby, as the Frosthound Alpha succumbed to its wounds. The battle was nearly over, with only Dominic and the clan chief still fighting, and a few ogre brutes clinging to life. "This is the end for you," Dominic informed him, knowing the creature wouldn't understand him. But the clan chief only smiled, and then roared, calling its clan to the battle. Trees crashed to the ground as frosthounds rushed through the forest, followed by a sharp decline in temperature as the combined ice magic of a Yeti clan came closer. The clan chief backed away and grabbed its sword, intending to end Dominic quickly. Dominic drew his pistol and emptied it at the clan chief, the rounds bouncing ineffectively off a hastily raised ice barrier. "Dom, what do we do?" Bella shouted. "Deal with the clan. Follow the mage's lead," Dominic called back. The Duskblade sect were mercenaries, and the two men who had been sent with him were master mages, at least level 20, with their stronger spells. That should be more than enough against the Yeti clan. The clan chief charged, and Dominic ducked, letting the blade chop down a tree above his head. Then he grabbed the creature's arm, preparing to shoot it in the face from point-blank range, inside any barrier it might try to erect. Instead, the clan chief hurled him away, and Dominic's shot missed. As he rolled across the forest floor, he saw Amy in the tree above him. It was the perfect opportunity. As the clan chief approached, Dominic moved left, turning the creature, so its side was to the mage hiding in the tree. 5 rounds rang out in rapid succession, and the clan chief's head was engulfed in a storm of fire as explosion-enhanced bullets slammed into its skull. It turned to engage the new threat, but Dominic raked his claws across its wrist, causing it to drop the massive sword and howl in pain. Amy smiled as she extended her arm into the clan chief's open mouth and fired. As if in slow motion, the clan chief froze. Then its knees folded, and it collapsed to the ground. "Thanks for that. Fire really is the way to deal with these things," Dominic sighed. "It's the only element that they're not strongly resistant to." The bullets didn't even pierce its hide in the first volley. But the clan is here. Dominic turned to see dozens of Yetis in close combat with their warriors. The adventurers were outnumbered 2-1, but Amy was already firing. With a level 20 pistol in each hand, and fire magic added by both the weapon and her personal magic, it only took a few direct hits to down them. Both Amy and Dominic were firing as fast as they could pull the trigger, and the riders were pushed back, revealing the corral that the mages had made of lightning magic, trapping the frosthounds. It was all that they could do to hold the barrier, but the gunslingers were splitting their attention between the hounds and the riders, targeting anything that looked vulnerable. Their medic was doing triage on a pair of injured warriors when Dominic approached, pistol in either hand to increase the effective damage he was doing. "Will they survive?" he asked. "If nothing gets to us, help the mages, they're going to break soon." Dominic nodded and cast a group stamina refresh, cleansing a bit of the exhaustion from the others and buying a few more seconds to shoot through the lightning barrier. "Are you good? I thought you were dead there a few times," Bella asked. "I'm pretty durable. Just keep shooting." Dominic's bullets tore through the weaker members of the Frosthound pack, while Amy helped the warriors deal with the riders. "We've got more incoming," one of the warriors called. A wave of defeat washed over the team as they realized that they had gotten themselves too close to the main army, and now their battle was drawing more than just scout teams to them. Dominic handed Bella his pistols and took 2 more from his storage. "Use those. They've got fire damage on them," he instructed. That made a noticeable difference. The levels of the magical items that everyone else had were simply too far below the level of what they were fighting. It wasn't often that a sane adventurer would take on a clan like this in combat. At least not without hundreds of men, which meant that they were unlikely to get a chance at the good loot. The hounds fell fast, with 2 more of the Dragon Breath revolvers in action. "What's our move?" was called as Amy executed the last of the Yeti with a shot to the base of the skull. "Grab the loot and get the hell out of here. I want us away from the army and into a clearing before anything arrives. Grab that sword too. It looks like something you would like," Dominic instructed. Everyone quickly touched the corpses, collecting the loot off them, and Amy tapped the clan chief, then smiled and gave Dominic a thumbs-up gesture. Was grabbed the oversized blade, which was a 2-handed weapon for him. Impractical but powerful. That was the important part. Even if it was harder to fight with a large sword, the amount of damage that it could do would let it slice through entire rows of goblins in a single swing, the way that it had cut through a pine tree like warm butter. "All clear, boss. Let's move," Amy called. Then they were running through the woods with 2 of the warriors carrying the wounded, and many others limping. Dominic fell back as the group moved. He could hear the distinctive thumping of hobgoblins approaching, moving faster than their team. "Everyone keep moving. Amy, you're with me. We will delay them until the team is clear," Dominic instructed. Bella saluted them, but was stopped next to Dominic. "All right, Wiz is with me. Bella, take care of the wounded. I seem to recall that you've got plenty of experience." Dominic relented. Bella smiled at her husband, then winked at Dominic. "Against my will, I assure you." Then, she was gone, following the team through the woods while the rearguard waited for the enemy to arrive. "This is a good sword. No wonder you didn't try to parry it," was noted casually as the thunder of breaking branches came closer by the second. "That and the fact that it likely weighs half what I do." Dominic laughed. "Actually, it's much lighter than it looks. It's just large." The berserker chuckled. The hobgoblins slowed as they noticed the trio waiting for them, and Dominic smirked at Wiz. "Our wives are going to be so mad when they realize that we only stayed back so we could get bonus loot." Amy laughed at the 2 men, then casually stretched as the hobgoblins approached. "Well, let's get on with it," was announced, then swung his sword in a flat arc, sending out a wave of ice magic that tore through an entire rank of hobgoblins in a single strike. "Oh man, I'm going to love this thing," he sighed. Dominic laughed as he began to shoot, dropping hobgoblins in piles all through the woods. "Spread out, don't let them walk around us. Wiz, I will be in range. If you have trouble, just shout." 50 hobgoblins had been confident of victory only a few seconds ago. But with that frost blade and the ridiculous firing rate of the gunslingers, they were dropping fast. So fast that they had only begun to consider retreating when the second group of reinforcements, a trio of ogres, arrived and chased them back into combat. Combat that quickly led to their doom. The ogres never saw the 2 gunslingers standing in the trees. They only saw Wiz, standing proud as he cut down the hobgoblins. But the second that bullets began to slam into their backs, no amount of magic resistance could make the pain go away. Dominic put his pistols away in favor of his rifle, using a single shot through the ear to take down an ogre, while Amy simply unloaded at incredible speed on another. The last to fall was the one that was engaged, but the ice magic on the blade cut through the crude wooden club of the ogre warrior, and then clean through its body, while was panted for breath. "Is there a potion or something for more mana? Because this is ridiculous. I've only used that skill like 3 times, and I'm winded," he complained. "It kills ogres in 1 hit, of course it's going to use some mana. Just save it for clearing large groups or landing killing blows." Amy chastised him. "But it's too cool not to use." The little mage laughed. "We can work with you on your mana reserves when we get back. It's not a fast process, but you can get some Magitech orbs and armor pieces that will help you recover what you've used. Dominic has pistols that regenerate mana on hit. I will have to do some shopping, now that I need it. Everything I have was chosen for extra strength." Wiz lamented. "Clean up the battlefield, and let's get moving. The group will be waiting for the good news." Dominic interrupted, already hearing movement in the distance. If they didn't get far enough from the battle, they would be caught again and again, until they were too tired to continue fighting. Dominic led them through the woods, and out into an open portion of grassland, near what used to be a barony house and surrounding farms. It was mostly still intact, with some crops in the fields, plants that had grown wild for the last decade. Perfect spot for the team to stop and rest. Few things improved in evening like fresh food while on the road, and while they were only a few kilometers from where they had found the closest scouts of the monster army, it should still be safe enough to move the team indoors and cook. Will it even be safe enough to stay in the house? Won't they just surround us? Bella asked. Dominic shook his head. We can set a guard, but I don't think they'll follow us out into the open. It makes them too vulnerable to riflemen. By the time that they've crossed 500 meters of open ground, One man with a good Magitech rifle can drop 50 hobgoblins. Do you have more rifles? One of the warriors asked hopefully. Yeah, I've got some that weren't transferred to the army yet. I've also got mortars, both ground-fired and shoulder-fired. If we need to defend a position, I can arrange it. Dominic agreed. The team spread out as they walked toward the house, picking vegetables as they went. By the time that they reached the old barony house, they had all the food that they needed for a few days' rest or an evening feast. Dominic cleared the house while the others set up for dinner. The house had a large Magitech stove, so there would be no smoke plume to give them away if anything came looking. Then, Dominic heard the soft patter of rain on metal roofing. The perfect scenario had arrived. The rain would hide their tracks through the long grass, as well as their scent. So, as long as nothing came soon, the monsters would never know that they had passed nearby. The rain was getting harder by the second, until it was a torrential downpour. Someone should send a message on the radio. Let them know that we're sheltering for the night. I'm not going back out in that just to pick a fight. Dominic informed the mages. Excellent choice, my lord. The mage laughed. After that last fight, a rain day sounded like just the thing to calm their nerves. Alexis stared at the note in her hands as the rain pounded down on the manor. I should have seen this coming, but at least we've got another beacon point set. They set one early, and now one wherever they're stopped for the night. Should we try to extrapolate the army insertion points from that? Or should we wait for more points to go up? She asked the gathered princes. Prince Claudius sighed. We should wait. We need at least 1 or 2 more points to give us a proper idea what the extents of the scouted area are. If they can't give us to that, we can deploy to the marked points, but it won't be a full encirclement. Was there any word of casualties? Prince Russell asked. Alexis shook her head. They didn't mention it at all. So, while that could be interpreted as 0 casualties, they might also have not wanted to make them public. The crown prince sipped rum and sighed. We will have to assume that they're safe somewhere and planning to continue in the morning, if the rain stops. If the rain stops is the caveat. This storm looks nasty, and even the airships are returning so that they're not hit by lightning. Claudius noted. That would make it difficult for the team to contact anyone, but it was critical to avoid lightning in an airship. A direct strike was a disaster. We will send the airships out again as soon as the lightning stops. With some luck, we will get contact again before morning. We have the units ready to move as soon as the portals are set. The rifles Dominic made have been distributed to cavalry units. Not as many men as the Natural Sons, but it's a start. We're also short on artillery, but your royal guards should have them, right? Russell asked. Alexis nodded. Yeah, they have both versions of the grenade launchers, so we could spread them out if we needed. But they're a bit tricky to use the first time, so it might be better not to. The prince sighed. I get it. I just wish that we'd remembered to ask him for artillery before he ran off with the adventurers. Alexis laughed at her brother. Should we wager on his trip? Perhaps how much each of them earned. Or the highest level monster core that they come back with. The men all considered the wager. How about a bottle of good rum on who is closest to the highest level monster core that they bring back? Excellent idea. I suspect that they might surprise us. If there is any chance of finding a champion among the outlying scout teams they're targeting, Dominic is almost guaranteed to have run into it already. So, guessing something low, like 10 or 15, seems too conservative to me. Prince George pondered. Alexis sighed. It seems likely that he will find at least an ogre warrior who doesn't belong among the scouts. For sure. They sat in silence as they reviewed the airship reports on what was likely to be found in the area. None of it looked too extreme, but there was a definite chance that they might have run into an ogre warrior, or even an ogre lord who had gone out to check on their underlings. But most of the outlying region is just goblins, hobgoblins, and minor members of the ogre clans. But on the far side, there were some minotaurs. It didn't look like they had made it that far tonight, but they would probably encounter them tomorrow. That would add a lot of level 10 monster cores to their pile, but it was unlikely to be the strongest opponents that they encountered. All right, I have my guess, Prince Fahad announced. The others nodded, but Alexis raised her hand. I say that we write it down and seal the guess, then we will open them when he gets back and see who won. It will be more fun if we don't know what everyone else wagered. Oh, that is brilliant. It does feel a bit macabre, wagering on it when we don't know if they've suffered casualties, but the chances that Lord Dominic will be seriously injured seem low. Prince Russell agreed. Fahad laughed. Do you not know? Even if he is seriously injured, it's probably not a big deal. The next time he kills something, he will just heal. That's one part of the legend that is almost certainly true. Alexis nodded. His arcane blast spell has a blessing on it that heals him. As long as he keeps casting, he should be fine. While the royals placed their wagers on the team's outcome, Dominic's team was cooking stew in the Barony Manor house and enjoying a warm evening. This is so much better than camping in the wilderness. It's really shocking how intact this place is, Bella noted. Dominic shrugged. Most of these houses had self-repairing spells placed on them. I will reactivate the one here before we leave so that it can be used as a command center in the future. The real danger was that we would have come inside and found that the whole place was full of corpses from the invasion. Seeing that many dead can disturb people, especially when the spells on the house either preserved the skeletons or mummified them. The adventurers looked around nervously, but Dominic shook his head. I looked already. The house is empty. Most likely, they either fled or the battle was in the yard somewhere. Well, we should set a watch schedule. Who wants first? Wiz asked. Why don't we take first? Bella suggested. Dominic nodded. All right, then I will take last. Who wants to take the middle watch? One of the gunslingers raised his hand. I will take middle watch. A warrior raised his spoon. I will watch with him. 2 at a time is better in case something happens. In that case, I will watch with Dominic. Amy added. Perfect. See you all in the morning. I will put biscuits on so they're ready at first light. Dominic informed them. Nothing made a rainy morning better than warm biscuits and a stove turned up to take the chill out of the air. The gunslinger woke Dominic early in the morning for his watch, and Dominic woke Amy, who was curled up by the stove. Most of the members had taken spots in the main room, where they could respond quickly to threats. The pair on watch sent one to the upper floor to look out the window toward the monster army, while the other patrolled the upper floor to ensure nothing was coming from another direction. All has been quiet so far, but it's still raining. Not as hard as it was before, but I doubt that anyone will be desperate to leave. He whispered. Dominic nodded. The sofa is comfortable. Get some sleep. I will make sure you're up just in time to eat. They had 3 more hours until most of the team would be waking up, and the biscuits would only take 20 minutes to bake, so Dominic went to rouse Amy, who went to the upper floor to watch for enemies. While she did that, Dominic crept into the basement to find the control panel for the house. It was in too good of shape not to have had a self-repair spell active when it was abandoned, and the whole building was set up with Magitech light bulbs. On the back wall of the basement, next to a small freezer room, Dominic found the controls and brought everything back online, while making sure that all the fireplaces and lights were inactive. It was better not to set anyone on fire, or to flash their eyes with a light bulb in the small hours of the morning. Worse, if the upstairs lights suddenly came on, then every monster for a kilometer or more would be able to see that the house was occupied. That might work as a great beacon for the army, once they arrived, but it would not go over well with the adventurers. With the power back on, Dominic made his way to the second floor, and found that Amy had moved a chair in the bedroom to sit by the now active fireplace while she stared into the night. She had hung a cloth over the mantel, blocking the light, so as not to ruin her night vision, but the heat still filled the room, driving away the chill of a rainy night. You really don't like the cold, do you? Dominic whispered. The desert gets close to freezing at night, and it's the bane of my existence. Now that I'm indoors, I am taking full advantage of Magitech heat while I can. She agreed. Anything to report? He added. There is another storm front moving in. It looks like the rainy season is here in full force, and it's not about to let up. Amy replied cheerfully. It might delay the military action, but most likely not. Arriving under cover of a major storm would let them get in place with a much lower chance of being detected, even if they had to give up the airborne scouting abilities of the airships to deploy in a storm like that. Dominic made a loop of the second floor, checking out all the windows. They had all been polished clean so that the scouts could look out, but there was nothing to spot. No monsters moved in the distance, no wildlife either. Everything had taken cover to get out of the driving rain, and the wind was beginning to pick up, howling through the slightly opened windows. For the sake of ventilation, few homes in Stantia province ever fully closed the windows. They always let a bit of fresh air in. But on a day like this, it made the house give what sounded like a mournful wail, with the shifting winds echoing in the rooms. Dominic closed the shutters which the team had opened for visibility, and returned to the bedroom where Amy was watching the army in the distance. "How is your night sight? Can you see more than just when the lightning flashes?" he whispered. The little mage smiled. "I have a night vision spell. I can see all the way to the tree line." "How are your eyes, Dragonkin?" Dominic chuckled. "As good as the average alley cat. I can see just fine in the dark." While the adventurers were comfortable in the barony house, the armies outside of Westover were not nearly as pleased about the current weather. "Set more lines. They're calling for winds over 90 kilometers an hour. That's 6 anchored lines per airship, and set them all to the same pivot point." The ground crew commander was directing. On the other side of town, the calls were nearly the same. "Extra securement on the tents, gentlemen. We're in for a major blow. Get everything up off the ground. I don't want to see a single crate, cot, or supply sack that isn't on a pallet or elevated. The forecast calls for multiple days of torrential rain, so mind your feet. Change socks often, and use the waterproofing on your boots and gloves." The supply sergeant was ordering. All the soldiers were in large common tents, with whole rows of cots inside. But most of them had been set with a ground tarp, and the cots on top of that. However, with this much rain in the forecast, even the ground tarp would want to be elevated so it didn't become an ankle-deep swimming pool. It was utter chaos, and the soldiers were quickly realizing that they simply didn't have enough equipment to elevate everything. So, it was supplies first, and then folding the edges of the ground tarps up inside the tent, hoping to keep the floors relatively dry as the ground underneath became saturated. At least they weren't in combat or stationed in a trench. "Does this mean that the stand ready for deployment order is withdrawn?" one of the lieutenants asked. The veteran sergeant just shrugged at him. "Not my problem. Once everyone's gear is safe from the rain, they can worry about where they'll be going." Dominic put the biscuits on first thing in the morning and added more vegetable to the stew before frying up a bunch of meat slices from the cured hams that were issued as Dago's military rations. The smell slowly woke the others, and Amy came down from watch to join them for breakfast and the morning planning meeting. "Do we have contact with Westover?" Dominic asked. Amy smiled. "Indeed we do, but not quite in the way that most would expect. You see, we can open portals. So, we can just open a small one and ask someone what is going on." The two older mages laughed. It was normally an insanely difficult feat of magic to target a portal so precisely, but they could open one directly on top of a targeting beacon, and there was one inside the newly built mage tower inside the elder's office. "We can try the radio first. If we set up the antenna outside from the second floor, we might be able to raise someone," the senior mage suggested instead. "All right, go with that. Set up and give the report. Then let me know if there is any confirmation." Dominic agreed. "Should we tell them that we're headed out to complete the mission today?" Everyone else turned to stare at him as if he were insane. "In 80-kilometer winds and rain more intense than the shower at my house?" Bella asked. "Right, silly question. It might be a mission for the military, but they'll have to understand that we're neither suicidal nor in danger of being court-martialed for ignoring orders," he joked. The mage went to set up the radio, while everyone else sat in the front room with the Magitech fireplace going. "You know, if you ignore the dust, this place is pretty good. But have the rains always been like this?" Bella asked. Dominic shrugged. "Pretty much. The storms get pretty intense when they roll in, and they can last for days. But they're not frequent. Most of the time it's just some afternoon rain during the wet season. That's easier to deal with, even if everything is a bit soggy all the time." "I can believe it," This much rain is going to turn the ground into soup, and even moving around is going to be difficult for a week. Forget trying to get a crop in the ground. Speaking of which, I'm glad that we managed it in time, but I hope it doesn't rot in the ground. She sighed. Dominic shrugged. It depends on where you planted and what, but the wet season crops are usually pretty good. As long as you went with crops that were already growing in the area, you should be fine. They've proven that they can grow for decades without anyone watching over them, so they should be fine to continue cultivating. One of the warriors chuckled. Now that's a good bit of farmer's logic. We did the same thing when we moved in, just cleared out the weeds, harvested what we could, and replanted the same thing in the same fields. If nothing good was growing there, we didn't plant anything. It left some fields open, but after the first year we will know better what to plant. But this sort of weather doesn't bode well for the merchant guild caravan that was supposed to be headed our way. Dominic sighed. You've got a point there. They're not going to be eager to get anywhere near this storm. Hopefully they're not caught in it. But we built the warehouse well above the river, so it shouldn't flood. The adventurers chuckled at his concern. From what they had learned, the duchy had made more in the last 2 months than the city of Castle had, and there was no need for crisis spending here. Compared to most of the nation, Westover Duchy was in an incredibly enviable financial position. While they had many staff members to pay and feed, food was plentiful, and money was coming in steadily. How Dominic had not managed to become a successful businessman before becoming a duke was a mystery to all of them. After a few minutes, the mage came back downstairs, smiling. I got a radio message through to the manor house. Castellan Julio responded, they have our report, and the army is holding position. They're in the same position that we are, with extreme winds and driving rain. It's unsafe to send the airships up, and the army is sheltering in place. So we have time to wait out the storm before we finish placing the beacons. I also updated them on the monsters that we have found while scrying for threats, and the Castellan says that should help them determine where to place military units. He reported. Excellent. This house gave me a great idea, actually. We should circle wider and place the beacons in the yards of barony houses, well away from the monster army. It will give them a good place to stage, even if it looks like the most obvious place in the world for them to arrive. Dominic suggested. Amy nodded. It'll be obvious, but if it's far enough from their position, it still gives the army time to set up and open space. If we send them all into the woods, they will still have to find somewhere to set up command and logistics because this will not be a 1 or 2 day battle. Was shrugged. The village guard liked to do things the same way. They would pick a farmhouse near the destination to use as a command post when they were running an extended mission. Then we have our goal. We can circle them and set the beacons, then head in from the perimeter to claim our loot before the army is in place. Dominic decided. The adventurers took a moment to consider that plan. They had already made pretty good money on this trip and hadn't lost anyone. There was no need to push their luck. All right, we will do that. Just have the mages pick us good targets. No more of the Frosthound riders. Those things were vicious. As the day wore on, the rain seemed to get even worse. You know, with as bad as this storm is, it might be wise to move before it ends. If we move to another manor house on the far side of the army, we can get a 3rd beacon set up. Then we can use the evening to get dried out, and repeat it tomorrow, if it's still raining. Dominic suggested. As one, the adventurers turned to look at the pouring rain outside. While that is sound logic, actually going out there to make it to the next location is going to be the issue. We've got rain gear, but that wind is brutal. Was noted. Amy shrugged. I can put a barrier over the group to block the wind. As long as we stay low and close, nothing will notice us moving through the grass. The big berserker got to his feet. All right, let's get going before we lose motivation. Is everything packed up? Dominic nodded. I cleaned up after dinner, so if you don't have any dishes or belongings out, we're good to go. Everyone had packed up after their meal, in case it stopped raining. They all knew that they would need to move the moment that it did, so that they could make it to another location before the monsters started getting active again. Out into the storm, Dominic led the group, with Amy right at his side and a barrier over their heads that was muting the wind. but which did not stop the rain. It wasn't that she was incapable, but a dome of deflected rainfall in a storm this intense would surely be noticed from some distance away, whereas a group of adventurers crouched low in the long grass was far less threatening in the dim evening light of the storm. So, miserable and wet, the team rushed to the location where the next barony manor should be, 5 kilometers away, on what the map indicated was atop a terraced hill, the same way as many others were built, for the purpose of vineyards or other crops. "There is someone in that building," Amy noted as they approached, creeping through haphazard corn crops. "The question is if they're unlucky, or if they're enemies." Bella commented dryly, already knowing what the answer was most likely to be. "You would have to be insanely unlucky to be traveling the wilderness and just end up at a barony manor that was only a kilometer or two from an army of 100,000 monsters. Drop the spell in case they're sensitive to magic. All the shutters are closed so they're not looking out. I will sneak up and go say hello while everyone else hides in the field," Dominic offered. The wind nearly battered them all to the ground when the spell was deactivated, but the lack of active spell use would make it harder for a mage to detect their approach, should that be who was hiding inside. Dominic had to rely on the bonuses from monstrous strength to keep him moving, even when crouched low in the potato fields after he left the corn. The wind was definitely stronger than it had been, and Dominic smiled as he felt the bite of magic on his skin as he passed through the wind barrier. There were definitely mages in that building. The sound of wood slamming against wood caught his attention, and Dominic carefully circled the house, using the stone wall around the yard to stay out of sight. The back door was off its hinges, torn free by the storm and a faulty latch. But Dominic didn't move right away. If it was a new development, someone should come to try to fix it, and that would give him the advantage of knowing his enemy. After half a minute, someone finally came to the door and awkwardly pulled it back into place, then cast a repair item type spell on it that reattached the door to the hinges. Someone in tattered Skipple Royal Academy robes. Dominic took advantage of the repaired door to rush forward and duck under the front porch, out of the rain. Then, an alarm began to blare. The mages inside must have set a perimeter around the building, and his approach had tripped the alarm. The noise was constant and blaring, a terrible setup for an alarm unless you were sleeping, which at least some of them obviously weren't. Above him, the shutter slammed open, and Dominic heard someone cursing with a heavy accent. "If that was another damned goblin tasked with passing us messages, I'm going out and killing that ogre lord," the voice complained. "What goblin would even make it here past the wind barrier? It's probably one of those hounds again. The Yeti clans have no respect at all, and they're nearly as difficult to control as the trolls were." A female voice countered. "Just put a barrier up and get out there. Find what triggered the alarm," the man demanded. With much grumbling, the woman retreated, and then a few seconds later, Dominic heard the front door open. He could still see the man through the open shutter, so it was the female mage who had gone out into the storm. That would make this one the elder of the sect, and the priority target. With one of his new pistols in his right hand, Dominic launched himself out from under the porch and into the open window. The mage's hands flared with magic, but Dominic was faster, and the pistol flashed just as the sound of thunder rolled across the plains. Blood leaked from the mage's forehead as Dominic pulled him out of the window, then dragged him under the porch. That should keep him for a second, while Dominic searched for the female. Annoyed, the woman circled the house, looking out over the fields as the rain battered her barrier. "Where the hell are you? Get out here, you retarded green beast," she shouted as she rounded the corner near the back door. She was on the final side of the house, and there was no sign of whatever had tripped the alarm. It had to be fairly large. A cat or rabbit wouldn't trigger the spell. But she couldn't see much through the rain on her barrier, and nothing was answering. She turned the final corner, and was about to go back inside when she sensed something behind her. "Nice day for fishing, isn't it?" Dominic greeted her, and the mage froze in shock. Then his pistols flashed and her barrier shattered. "No, please," were her last words before the pistols fired again, and Dominic had a second body to dump under the wooden back porch. Dominic opened the front door and strolled inside as if he belonged. The confident footsteps should avoid tipping off anyone who was in the house. And he could smell more than 2 people had been here recently. None of them were on the main floor, though. Come downstairs. The ritual is almost finished, someone called, and Dominic smiled. It was mighty kind of them to make this easy on him. Dominic walked downstairs with a carefree gait, right into an ongoing sacrificial ritual. The mage on the far side of the circle panicked and began to point at Dominic, but the others were too intent on the spell. Focus, an elderly mage complained. Monster, the mage stammered. The elder turned, and Dominic smiled as his pistols came up. Spells flew in one direction, bullets in the other, and everyone threw themselves out of the way the best that they could. Unfortunately for the elder and the man whose back had been to Dominic, they were not fast enough, and their blood joined the ritual circle. Dominic crouched as he ran along the wall to flip over a broken desk with a mage behind it. 2 more bullets marked another casualty, and then Arcane Blast took out a 4th mage. Only one was left in the room, tears in his eyes and arms around his legs as he hid in the corner of the room. Where, oh where, has my little mage gone? Is he behind the desk? Dominic sang as he silently circled the other way, careful not to step into the still charged ritual circle. Oh dear God of magic, save this humble soul. Don't let me die like this. A soft voice chanted, over and over, as Dominic stalked toward him. Peekaboo. The mage screamed in a tone so shrill that Dominic was sure the windows would break, then promptly passed out. Quickly, he stuffed a rag in the mage's mouth and bound his hands, so no ritual magic could be used. Then, Dominic hoisted him on his shoulder and carried the mage up to the main floor. He waved out the front door, calling the others over, and then returned to his unconscious prisoner. Only he realized that he was not alone in the house. The soft wail of a baby came from upstairs, and Dominic sighed. He was a monster, but he wasn't a monster. Bella, get in here, we've got an issue, he shouted out into the storm. The gunslinger ran inside and looked around, but didn't find any threats. What's happening? Where is the threat? She asked. There is a crying baby upstairs, and I'm about 90% sure that I just murdered its parents. And that is an emergency? You've got to know more about childcare than I do. The crying is killing my head. Bella rolled her eyes, while the Duskblade sect mages laughed. We will take care of it. We're both parents already, we know the drill. Was there a female mage with them? She will most likely have the supplies, he asked. 2 of them. One in the basement, one under the back porch. Just watch out for the blood ritual in the basement. It's still charged, and I don't know what it does. The mage cursed. You didn't let their blood mix with the ritual, did you? Dominic had the grace to look embarrassed. A few of the bodies might have leaked onto it. I used pistols. While they talked, Amy had already gone upstairs and came down with twin newborns dangling in a basket made from a folded fuzzy blanket. Here, take these. Someone else can check the basement. Maybe take them outside or something. They smell awful, she complained. You will be a terrible mother, her senior sect member replied. Amy shrugged. He had the babies now, they were no longer her problem. Moments later, a very annoyed and wet mage came in from the back door and stomped up the stairs, then came right back down. I checked both bodies. Neither of them had the supplies. They were in the nursery. From what I can tell, they've been here for close to 3 months. The children are over 2 months old, and they were almost certainly born here. The woman in the basement was the mother. That's a monster summoning ritual, by the way. They've been calling monsters under their control to the area and then dispatching them to the horde, he explained. Amy snapped her fingers and he shook his head. No, the spell won't work for us to summon our own monsters. They had been sacrificing human lives to it to power the spell, and even if we knew the spell, we would have cast our own. You can't transfer control of a death ritual, he reminded her. The little mage sighed. Well, it was worth a shot, but how are we going to work this? We can't just bring a pair of newborns with us to hunt monsters, and you can't stuff them in a storage ring when they're alive. I worry about you. Seriously, I worry about you a lot. We are just going to open a portal back to the sect and give them to the sect master. He can have someone raise them there, or give them to a local family who wants to adopt. Both their parents are presumably mages, so they should be talented when they grow up. We can just tell them that they were foundlings, and they can live out the orphan fantasy of having a secretly powerful, mysterious bloodline awaken for them as they grow up, he suggested. The adventurers chuckled at his description of the situation. Indeed, that was a common fantasy among orphans, right behind their parents being wealthy nobles who had been looking for them for their whole lives. What's with the survivor? He's starting to wake up, Amy asked, now that the immediate concern was taken care of and someone was changing the baby's diapers. I saved him for interrogation. He pleaded with the god of magic not to let him die like the others, so I thought that I would oblige. Dominic explained. Was smiled. I'm good at getting traitors to talk. The two older mages laughed. You understand that we're battle mages of the Duskblade sect, right? We are quite literally professionals at extracting information. The captured mage's eyes were wide as he panicked and tried to sign something. But he was restrained, and Dominic had tied his hands closed, so he couldn't even get a basic message across. All right, I am going to untie you, but if you don't behave, I will let the dragonkin and his apprentice have you, the older mage instructed. The prisoner nodded rapidly and was moved to untie him. The mage sat still, not moving even after he was untied. You might as well start speaking, because if we let the Duke of Westover start making up the questions, this is not going to end well for you. He's got a bit of a grudge against the entire Dagos nation, Amy suggested. The mage nodded eagerly as he realized the situation that he was in. I will tell you anything that you want, but I'm just an acolyte. I was in my second year when the war started. So, you were a student at the Skipple Royal Academy? Dominic asked. The prisoner nodded. All of us who were studying under the elders were drafted for the battle. Not that we knew that at first. In the start, they told us that it was all a training exercise, summoning armies of monsters to help train the Dagos army. That was why they were all summoned to rural areas, they told us. But it always felt wrong. There was something that was just off about it all, and we never saw any Dagos troops at all. Instead, elders started taking the monsters east into Signia. It was all wrong, but what could we do? Then, things started to get weird. Our academy gear was deactivated, as if we had been expelled. A few weeks after that, we got word that some of the others had been killed in action, and that we needed to send reinforcements to Signia. Just matter of fact, as if we should have known all along. Dominic frowned. And where did you get the fuel for the summoning rituals? The prisoner went quiet for a few seconds, clearly trying not to think about the answer. The first ones were demi-humans captured by the Dagos army, traitors, war criminals, and fugitives. But then, they started sending us civilians who were clearly human, and even soldiers in Signia army uniforms. The last few were a traveling group who happened across our camp. He whispered. Is that a normal practice in Skipple? Dominic asked. The mage shook his head. The prisoners, yes. The Royal Academy teaches blood magic as an elective. It's considered a dark art, but it's powerful, so a lot of people take it. But when they started bringing people who weren't criminals, it was already too late for us. Our auras are so corrupt that we could never be respectable mages again. He pulled an amulet out of his robes and revealed a skill core that was glowing with black energy. If another mage saw that before he had a chance to explain himself, there was a good chance that he would be executed on sight as an evil practitioner. The level of evil that you had to commit to end up with a core that black was immense. Even with all the people he had killed, Dominic's trade skill core hadn't been corrupted by his energy. Even Amy's core was only a blood-soaked red, not stained with the most irredeemable black of a truly evil being. But on the other hand, there was power in that sort of evil. Human sacrifice led to rapid power growth, and allowed the use of magic well beyond one's own level. You are right. Even if we let you go right this instant, only your own allies from the Skipple Academy would accept you. It was either a brave or an insanely stupid move to go along with that sort of plan to sacrifice innocents for summoning rituals. Dominic agreed. The prisoner sighed. It's not like we had a choice. The last one who objected ended up in the ritual circle. The adventurers nodded. That was a definite downside of being in an evil sect. You didn't have any choice but to continue being a member. Nobody else would have you, and they would kill you if you tried to leave or expose them. How many others are there? Dominic asked, continuing the interrogation. I don't know. There were 300 students who left the academy at the start, but I heard that more of them came later after the headmaster was killed. But they don't tell us junior acolytes where anyone is. I know that we're the only ones in the area, and we're in charge of building up this army. But that's all I know. So, all these monsters were summoned by your group? Dominic asked. The prisoner shook his head. No, most of them were herded here by the ones that we summoned at the start, before things got ugly. We've only added a few hundred a day for the last however long we've been here. The spell kind of messes with your sense of time, since you're in a trance most of the time. A few hundred a day for 3 months? That was a lot of monsters, but far from being the majority of the force, which meant that they had found tens of thousands of monsters somewhere. Where were you when you started? How far did you herd the monster horde before stopping here? Dominic demanded. The prisoner shrugged. It was winter in the desert of Axbridge when we started. Just starting winter. We made it all the way here after that, summoning more every day and grabbing every monster we could find. It was almost winter there now, which meant that this whole plan had been in action for at least a year. With the confusion of the prisoner, and the chance that he was omitting details, it might be 2 years or more that they had been building up hordes of monsters for the attack of Signia. Now they could start getting down to the details, the important part of the interrogation that would matter to the armies when they finally arrived. You said that you gathered all the monsters you came across. What did you collect? I need details. Dominic insisted. The mage looked pale, then nodded his head. All right, I will tell you everything I know. Those were the last words that he ever said. The moment that the words were out of the prisoner's mouth, black veins started to spread across his throat and down his chest as he gasped for air, wheezing futile wordless curses at his mentors. Killing curse to prevent betrayal. We should have expected that. Amy sighed. Well, we got some details out of him anyhow. Enough that we will be able to give the armies an idea of what they're facing, based on the territory that this group was supposed to have passed through on their way here. The Frosthound Riders must have been one of the first acquisitions, as they live higher up in the mountains. But they might have also been summoned. Dominic noted. Amy shook her head. None of the dead here were strong enough to summon them, so they had to have been brought with them as they traveled. But that also means there are likely to be more Yeti. Obviously, there are going to be lots of goblins, and we spotted some minotaurs. But beyond that, the mix could vary based on their route. The Duskblade sect knows the area well, so they'll be able to guess. But we don't know where in the desert they started. The monsters are very territorial, so it could be scorpions, but I suspect that it will be minotaur heavy, with a side of gnolls and centaurs. Dominic smiled grimly. That sounds manageable. If we send the armies in and most of what they face are goblins and minotaurs, they'll all be familiar with the fights. We also saw some ogres, which always give Signia issues because of their magic resistance, but other than that, it will come down to monster population issues. Even with all the troops that we have coming, it's still going to be a bad day for most of the units. And that will be hard to explain to the commanders back home. Well, we have a third beacon placed now, so they should have some idea of where the army is. But this rain doesn't feel like it's going to let up anytime soon. Are we going to move again in the morning? Or are we waiting this time? Bella asked. Dominic looked to the others, who all had the same expression of do not move again in the rain. We will wait out the weather this time. Using the same trick twice is questionable at best, even if we're not expecting to find any more mages. As little as they were telling their acolytes, and given the size of the army, I suspect that there are more mages in the area, and we simply haven't found them yet. Do you think that we can get another message through to Wistover? He asked. We will try. They need to know what we found. If necessary, we will open a small portal to transmit through. The elder mage agreed. Whatever it takes. I just don't want our people coming in blind, or getting ambushed from behind by forces hiding in the barony manors. Amy turned up the fire in the Magitech fireplace, while the others split off to go change out of their wet clothes. That was the priority, and the fireplace would only dry them out so quickly when they were literally dripping on the floor. It was a miracle that they had made it this long without anyone sneaking off to change outfits, but they were all professionals and used to being caught out in the weather. Just like the night before, they all got comfortable in the main room with a watch set for the evening. But this time, they made a point of locking the basement door after Dominic went down to check that all the Magitech functions were online. "This place definitely gives me the creeps," Bella muttered as she set up her bedroll behind the sofa in the middle of the room. "That's unavoidable. Just be glad that your nose isn't as sensitive as mine is. I can smell the old blood and corruption from the basement," Dominic replied. Bella frowned. "And you're still willing to stay in here? It's not the most disgusting place that I've ever spent a night, and we know that it's relatively safe, now that everything that might have been a threat is dead. If we had cleaning supplies, I would have doused the basement, but they've been here long enough that the old stock is all empty, and I forgot to grab their storage rings," Dominic explained. There weren't any cleaning supplies in their rings. With the basement door closed, it shouldn't be too bad. A bit like sleeping next to a poorly maintained barn, Amy offered. Dominic chuckled at the comparison. She wasn't exactly wrong, but the scent of blood magic was worse than the general rot and old blood in the house. On the other hand, that smell will help disguise us. Nobody will be looking for enemies here, where they're already expecting to smell humans and magic. So, we can remain here for the evening without anyone becoming suspicious," he added. "Perfect. Then we will take the same watch schedule as before, and see if the rain stops overnight." While that sounded great to them, the mood in Westover was much different. They found an entire sect war party of mages in a manor house, using blood magic to summon? That is not good. Not good at all, Prince George was muttering. "At least we know what the missing mages from the Royal Academy have been up to," Alexis offered. "The question is where the rest of them went. There are hundreds of mages missing," the aging prince reminded them. "Hopefully, not gathered around this monster horde. But we have locations on a number of them in Dagos as well, leading the siege of the cities." Prince Fahad added. "Someone needs to start an official count. Until we know how many are found, we don't know how many other locations likely have an army of monsters waiting to be deployed." The next morning's watch shift started out with pouring rain, but as the breakfast cooked, the sky cleared, and by the time that the sun was up, a vibrant rainbow crossed a clear sky. The grass is green. The sun is shining. It's a wonderful day for a hunt, Amy joked as she joined Dominic in the kitchen. The adventurers laughed at her enthusiasm for finding more monsters. They had already made a small fortune off the monster cores, and they hadn't even sorted through what they had gotten from the mages. If they had some decent items, it might work out very well for them. But they wouldn't turn down another day of hunting while they placed the last few beacons. That was their primary goal now that the rain was ending. Get the beacons placed, and then hunt the monsters until the army came and overtook their position. How far out should we go? If we stay 2 kilometers from where we expect the army to be, we won't get much of a fight, but we should be able to place the beacons quickly. On the other hand, a couple more fights will be easy on the pockets. I haven't forgotten that I owe the Duke a rather large amount of money," one of the gunslingers joked. Bella laughed, and looked at the 2 rare pistols that Dominic had lent her for the last battle. If she wanted to buy them, she was going to need to get some very impressive drops. It would be painful to give them back at the end of the trip, but for now she wouldn't say anything, and keep using them through the day, until they were back in Westover. "Why don't we let the others use scrying? That should give us a balance of making good time to the target, and a chance to make some money. I seem to recall them saying that there were minotaurs nearby, and that means there is a chance we might get some magic weapons," Amy suggested. The older mages nodded, and Dominic shrugged. "I don't see it hurting anything. Let's go hit the minotaurs on our way to another manor to set a beacon. All we need are 2 more beacons set around the far side of the army. But we should try to stop near something good. A goblin camp won't make us much money." Bella smiled. You have a point, we need to pick our finishing point well. We can't be wasting half a day on the lowest value targets when the army is coming. Let them do it, since they're not going to be making much off them anyhow. You said they're going to be moonlighting as mercenaries, but I'm assuming the commanders will still be taking the largest share of their loot. Dominic shrugged. I left it up to them. It's not really my problem, as long as the attack goes through and nobody accuses them of waging a proxy war on behalf of Signia. As soon as they were packed up again after breakfast, Dominic led the group out into the fields, headed for the area where the mages thought that there should be minotaurs. The giant monsters weren't hard to find. They were loud, aggressive, and 3 meters tall. Unfortunately, there were also a lot of them. All right, how do we work this? Bella asked after she caught sight of their camp. Amy took out a small notebook and began drawing on it. The gunslingers can spread out on this pattern along the edge of the tree line, with the mages right where we are, serving as the center of the formation. The warriors will cluster in front of the mages and draw the minotaurs in so that the gunslingers can attack mostly from the sides. You will have to be accurate, because if they turn away from the main attack to take you out, you'll be on your own. But if you don't let them charge you, we will be able to herd them into the trap relatively easily, she suggested. Bella frowned. I can see it working, but also going horribly wrong. There are simply too many of them. Dominic sighed. She wasn't wrong. His quick count made out 200 of them, all somewhere around level 10 monsters. That wouldn't be an easy fight for the warriors, and they were above the levels of the weapons that most of the team had. The mages, Bella, Wiz's new sword, and Dominic would be the only ones with a power advantage. That was not encouraging. But with even a few of them and some area damage, they could thin the herd before it got to the point of overwhelming the warriors. Any objections? Dominic asked. Nobody raised an opinion, so he started to move into position. The formation had Bella on the far right while he took the far left with Amy on his right. The other gunslingers picked spots, and Dominic gestured for Wiz to pick a fight. Logically, the mages could do it as they had the range. But Wiz had a new sword, and he hadn't gotten a chance to really use it yet. The big berserker stepped out into the open, and an arc of ice flew from his sword to the minotaurs, tearing apart tents in their camp and knocking over cook pots. That was the way to do it. A few deaths would make them mad, but wrecking their camp and spoiling their breakfast was far more effective. The minotaurs hefted their weapons and roared as they charged toward the berserker. Everyone held their ground as the trees trembled with their approach. Then, Dominic lifted his pistol and imbued his first shot with fireball. The shot exploded in the horde, signaling for the other gunslingers to join the fight. Chain lightning from the mages joined the explosions, and a flurry of shots rang through the woods, dropping minotaurs from the edge of the herd and focusing the charge in the middle, where they would collide with the warriors. It was all going exactly to plan. Until it wasn't. The minotaurs didn't take long to realize that the force they could see was not the entire enemy army, especially when Dominic and Amy were adding fire magic to their gunshots. You really need to make me a firebolt spell gem when we get back. Fireball takes too much mana, and that blast is just enough fire damage to keep them spicy. Dominic joked as the herd began to turn to guard against them. Arcane Blast seems to be doing just fine. Plus, it smells better than burning minotaur fur. Amy laughed, then fired a round through the throat of an axe-wielding monster. Can you two not do that now? The other gunslinger on their side of the line pleaded. It helps with the tension. You should try it, it's cathartic. Amy suggested. Just kill the damned things before they get here. He swore, then ducked as a hurled sword nearly took his head off. Trade me for one with mana regeneration. Amy complained as she reloaded. Fine. Here. Take good care of it and I'll trade you back after. Dominic agreed. His own pistols were significantly larger than the ones he made for her hands, but her grip strength was surprisingly good. She didn't have any trouble holding onto the pistol as she fired, and the exhaustion that was creeping up on her seemed to fade as the returned mana on hit refilled her mana pool. Soon, she was down to simply shooting with only one fireball per reload. That was about what she was regenerating from the pistol shots, but Dominic got more than enough back from the arcane blast that he could keep them up indefinitely. The problem was that every wave of minotaurs was dying a little closer to them than the last one was, and more kept coming from somewhere. They were well past the 200 that Dominic had estimated earlier, and there were still more joining the back of the herd. "This is getting out of hand," Wiz complained as he cut down another of the oversized beasts. "We might need to take another math class when we get home," Bella shouted back, her voice nearly lost in the noise. "I blame the dragon kin. He's supposed to be the educated one." Bella laughed at the berserker as she kept firing. Her flank had only attracted a little attention from the monsters, as their pistol shots were not visible, and the damage wasn't as obvious as the fireballs that Dominic and Amy were using at the start. But they had cut down so many of the minotaurs now that they were being forced to retreat into the trees, as the bodies were piling up. That was an advantage for them, as the minotaurs couldn't see the defenders until they were past the piles of bodies and into the edge of the forest, but it also made it more difficult to target as the trees got more densely packed and thicker in the trunk. Amy retreated up a tree, where she could shoot down at the monsters, her preferred battle position, Dominic noticed. Being elevated gave her the ability to shoot past the front rank of monsters to take out ones that looked stronger or who were distracted and easy targets. That increased her kill count and the density of the horde that was making it into the woods to chase Dominic. "Retreat to the warriors. Keep the beasts from flanking them. I am going to move further out to split them further," Dominic instructed the third member of their flank. "Got it, boss. Good luck." The minotaurs could sense and smell the magic of their attacks, making Dominic and Amy the priority targets away from the main group of warriors, and they followed easily when Dominic began moving through the woods. Amy smiled as she realized the minotaurs had forgotten that she existed, and were running right past her to follow Dominic away from the group. They thought that he was running away, and were intending to chase him down and punish him. But that was the opposite of what he was doing. He was stretching out their lines so that they would be approaching him one or two at a time, a rate where he could easily cut them down and keep moving. Once the line was thinned, Amy got back to work, killing off random minotaurs with their backs turned. They never knew that there was danger, and with the mage moving silently through the trees, they couldn't locate the source of the threat when one of their numbers dropped in front of them. So, they assumed that the one they were chasing was setting traps for them, while Dominic worked a serpentine pattern through the forest. He didn't want to get too far from the others, but he also didn't want to let the minotaurs group up and attack him from multiple sides at the same time. His limited close combat skills weren't up to that sort of challenge, and he would have to switch to a melee weapon which would reduce his effectiveness. The pistols were more effective than his innate magic, which he had originally wanted to avoid, for safety reasons. But they weren't for general-purpose sale, so the chances that one would be used against him were low. Amy dropped from the trees next to him and gestured toward the front. "They're starting to run low on monsters to fight. Let's push forward and rejoin the group. Just follow the same path back so we can loot the bodies," she explained. Dominic charged at the closest minotaurs, firing with both hands, then kicked the bodies as he passed, tracing a path of carnage back through the battlefield. Hopefully, he would get some good loot out of this, but he was certainly getting a lot of level 10 monster cores for the communal pot. Just this one battle would have tripled the total level of cores that they had collected for this trip. They just had to find out where all the minotaurs were coming from. Wiz was looking haggard when Dominic finally made it back to the main group. The warriors were still holding their formation, but they had retreated hundreds of meters into the forest. Nobody had fallen, but the other gunslingers had closed ranks to join the warriors instead of risking being cut off in the forest. With them nearby, they could defend the flanks from the monsters that tried to surround them, while the mages did their best to keep everyone from being overrun. "Let's move around the horde and attack from the side. It will give them time to breathe," Dominic instructed. "Got it, boss. Does this count as stress testing for a new pistol design?" Amy joked. "If we want it to count, we should make records every 1,000 shots." The two of them laughed as they fought their way forward. The Minotaur horde had finally stopped coming, but there was no sign of where they had all been hiding. That was something that Dominic knew they would have to investigate before they set the beacons. If they didn't, they risked sending the army into battle while expecting a third of the monsters that they were likely to face. "Dom, Hit the back ranks and see if you can get them to turn. Bella called. On it. A few arcane blasts and a pair of fireballs from Amy were enough to stop the advance. The Minotaurs had lost their leader at some point, and they were only following the herd into combat for vengeance at this point. Without guidance, the attack from three sides stopped the Minotaurs in their tracks, and the bodies began to pile up in the woods, with the warriors overrunning the dead to push forward into the survivors. Dominic did the same, collecting all the monster cores he could, with Amy getting anything he missed. Slowly, the number of monsters dwindled, and Dominic joined the others. "What's our status?" he asked. "We've got 4 down, all alive. We're not going to be moving at full speed anytime today, but we're pretty confident that we can keep them stable on our way to a manor house," the team's medic explained. "All right, I will go check to see where the excess Minotaurs were hiding. Head off in that direction and go straight until you hit the manor house. Then, send a radio message after you set the beacon and let the army know we're there for the day. We will give everyone time to recover before we decide if we need to take a portal straight home, but we might be able to get a healer to come to us instead," Dominic ordered. The group headed for the safety of the manor house, while Dominic and Amy went to explore the now abandoned Minotaur camp. The camp clearly didn't hold as many Minotaurs as they had just killed. Not even the portion that had separated from the fight to face Dominic and Amy in the woods could fit within the campsite that they could see. And the camp was in the open where it should be clearly visible. "Do you sense anything?" Dominic whispered to the mage as they approached the larger tents in the center of the camp. "Lingering magic. I think that there was a portal or other spell active recently," she agreed. Amy gestured to a large tent, and Dominic stalked to the entrance, then threw the flap wide. Inside was nothing more than a simple Minotaur commander's tent, with fur piled for a bed, and a cook fire in the middle of the floor. But now that he was close, he could feel it too. There was magic here recently. Dominic kicked at the dirt with his boot, trying to locate the exact position. Then, his boot hit something solid, and he went into his storage cube to grab a small shovel. Buried just under the surface was a copper plate that looked suspiciously like the portal beacons that they had been setting. "Amy, come check this," he called. She ran inside, then frowned at what was in his hands. "I was right, it was a portal. They sent reinforcements when we started the attack. Someone needs to let the armies know that what we're facing here isn't just the monster horde that is assembled, but many times this number. When our full force attacks, Prince Kaizan and his lackeys are going to send everything that they can muster at us." Dominic nodded. "It will be vital to hit the command tents and find the beacons. We probably missed them in the previous fights because nobody sent reinforcements against us. But that doesn't mean there are no portal beacons there. It's most likely how they are getting the monsters from here to the battles, if there are no mages hiding in the area. That's a big if. I don't sense any of them here. Do you? I know your sense of scent is pretty good," she asked. Dominic shook his head. "No, there are no signs of humans or anything close to humans here. All I smell is Minotaurs. I also don't smell any blood magic here. There is some blood, obviously, but it's coming from the open area by the cook pots. Also, it's not human blood. I think that they found a wild elk or similar creature. But that's another question that we need answers to. How are they feeding this army? There aren't enough animals in the area to feed them all, and I don't see any signs of agriculture." Amy shrugged. "Most monster species can go weeks or months without eating. It's in their nature to be able to survive long times without food. If they couldn't, they would have to expose themselves more often, and they would be hunted to death. Ah, the little details that make all the difference. So, they can't be here more than a few more weeks before they have to go somewhere. That means there is a major invasion coming if we don't eliminate them," Dominic informed her. Amy shrugged. "When you put it that way, yeah. They have to move them soon. They've been cycling them through, I think. Some going to fight and more being summoned or sent here by portal. But there are so many here that it's becoming untenable. We should rejoin the others and pass along the message. There isn't an active portal here, though we should do something about this beacon," Dominic decided. Amy smiled. "I think that I have a most wonderful idea. You see, Beacons are set to their exact location by default, but that's not the only spot that they can be linked to. You can set a location and then move them. So we can put the new arrivals somewhere much better than here. Perhaps the bottom of the lake somewhere? Or out in the ocean? Dominic smiled. Oh, that could work, but you could also just move it vertically, and they wouldn't be likely to notice the difference. Amy laughed at the thought of monsters falling from thousands of meters in the sky, but it wasn't practical. The vertical adjustment was something that every mage knew they would have to do when they tried to open a portal. But if you moved the beacon location to the middle of the ocean, it would be too far from anything for them to correct it after the fact. I will do the adjustment. It needs to be too far for them to fix it after they've started the casting. Amy replied, then took the plate from him to start inspecting the spell that had been placed on it. Oh, this is good. Not only is the target set, the origin is set. I can trace it back to the location where the monsters were coming from and where they're being sent back to, she explained after a few minutes. In that case, can we open a portal for a few seconds before you change the destination? Dominic joked. If we do that, we might as well destroy this beacon, because they'll know that it's compromised and shut off its link. Dominic sighed. Well, that takes the fun out of things. It's better not to let them know that we found it for now. If they send one load of monsters into the ocean, that's enough for a start. The pair turned toward the direction the other monster camps, making sure that there was nothing else coming while Amy focused on changing the destination of the beacon. All seemed normal, and the few monster patrols they could see in the distance hadn't noticed anything off about the Minotaur camp. All right, the portal is relocated. I also added a tracker to it so I will know if it's been reactivated. If they attempt to fix what I changed, I will know that as well. We can go join the others now. They moved silently through the abandoned fields, headed for the location where they should have found the other group members. There was a manor house visible in the distance, but as they approached, Dominic didn't smell or hear any of their group members. Something is off, he whispered to Amy. The mage nodded and drew her pistols. Should we check it out? 50 meters from the house, Dominic felt the pulse of magic that indicated he had just breached a barrier, and then noticed that the appearance of the house had slightly changed. The door went from closed to open, and there was a broken window plus the smell of blood. Old blood. Another cult, he whispered, then noticed that Amy was stuck on the other side of the barrier. She was speaking, but he couldn't hear her. Then, she motioned to one side, and Dominic saw that the rest of the group was outside the barrier, surrounded by a second, smaller dome of magical energy. He signaled her to go see what was up with them, and primed an arcane blast as he approached the house. As he approached, Dominic could hear the voices from inside, but there were background noises that didn't match a manor house. There was a portal active, and it led to wherever the mages were gathered. Dominic considered his options, then heard muffled voices near the door. We have those adventurers locked down in the field. Should we go collect them for the rituals? A woman was asking. Give them an hour to stew. The more fear they have, the better. The mages with them aren't strong enough to break our barrier, even working together. An older-sounding woman replied. In his storage cube, Dominic began organizing munitions. He didn't dare to make more so close to the portal, but he had plenty on hand. He moved them all into an empty crate that was intended to store a shipment of rifles for the army. It held hundreds of mortars, enough that he wasn't worried about them being insufficient for the job. Then, he carefully ducked his head to look in the door and saw that the open door was the portal, and that the other side was a round stone room with a spell circle in the middle, and windows all around. A tower of some sort, most likely the top floor of a mage tower belonging to a member of the Skipple Royal Academy. The two women had their backs to him, and they were still discussing what to do with the adventurers as a man with a curved blade in his hand cut open a young woman on an altar by the back of the room. The tortured woman's eyes caught Dominic's and then the crate in his hands. The moment she realized what he was doing, she smiled. The mage cutting into her paused, satisfaction on his face. He thought that she was broken, and he was likely right. But when Dominic stepped to the door and tossed the crate full of mortars in, he realized that things had gone horribly wrong. Fireball detonated the contents of the crate, and Dominic leapt aside. A dull boom shook the air, followed by the sound of crumbling stone, then falling rocks, as the flames licked the air above his head. Then the portal collapsed, ending the devastation at this end, and Dominic looked back into the house. It looked undisturbed, with a layer of thick dust on everything. But the dust was too perfect, like it had been laid with magic, and not affected at all by the wind or the passage of time. He had to investigate. Dominic moved through the door with a pistol in each hand. There was no motion in the house, no sign that there was anything alive at all. But Dominic had felt that same sensation before he passed through the barrier over the property. A quick check of the second floor showed a more natural distribution of dust, and Dominic was sure that nobody had come up here in years. Which left the basement. Dominic made his way to the door, which swung open silently, on freshly oiled hinges. At the bottom of the stairs, Dominic saw that the room had been immaculately cleaned, with portals open on the 3 visible walls. It was a shame that he used all his mortars. In front of him, a portal opened to the view of a large stone room, lined with bunks filled with sleeping mages in Skipple Academy robes. That would be the priority target, unless the other portals revealed something unexpected. Moving to the bottom step, Dominic looked into the other 2 portals, and found them full of ragged-looking prisoners. Now he knew where the mages in the first portal were getting the sacrifices from. He made a shushing gesture when the prisoners saw him, and then lined up on the portal to the bunk room. There was a panicked silence, as all the prisoners were too afraid to breathe loudly. Then, Dominic unleashed dragon flames on the bunk room, the cone of fire cleansing everything it touched, shattering barriers, and sucking the oxygen from the enclosed space as the stone room turned into an oven. The screams of the dying joined the horrified screams of the prisoners, and Dominic sensed movement behind him, coming from one of the portals full of prisoners as he finished his work. Quickly, he raised an area barrier, just in time to stop a firebolt. "Lower your weapons and drop your mana crystals," a male voice demanded as Dominic turned. "Ah, an elder of the Skipple Royal Academy. Such a pleasure to meet you here today. I had a most wonderful conversation with some of your members earlier. Unfortunately, I am not carrying any mana crystals to drop. Now, would you like to release that prisoner? It will be messy if I have to shoot through them." Dominic replied. The mage's face went pale as he saw the horns on Dominic's head, only visible from the front with his hood up. I know you," the elder began. "Everyone knows me, and you should know that human shields will not deter me, especially when I have no idea who they are." Dominic agreed. "Why are you here? What do you want with us?" the mage asked. "That really should be my question. You're on my territory. I came because your people were becoming a nuisance to the local troll population, and then they had the audacity to attack me. Me. The nerve." The prisoners looked horrified by the conversation as they were forgotten. But the mage seemed to be understanding something. "You're the new Duke of Westover, aren't you? The one that Prince Kaizen demands we eliminate for the sake of Dagos?" he asked. "That would be correct. He has been quite the thorn in my side since he lost the official battle for the throne. Are you open to advice?" Dominic replied casually. The mage nodded, and Dominic continued. "He has no idea what he has brought down on himself. If you want to survive, I would suggest breaking ties and running. Go as fast as you can, as far as you can, and never look back. If you don't, then every nation on the eastern side of the continent will hunt you until you have nowhere left to go. The prince is finished, and everyone is simply waiting to split up the spoils." "That's not true, it can't be. Our sect is strong, and the armies we've built." Dominic cut him off. "The armies you built have been dismantled by Magi Tech artillery, and mercenary adventurers promised extra pay on top of their loot. Pay that is being taken from sacking the cities loyal to the prince." The mage frowned, then lowered his dagger and let the prisoner fall to the floor. Then he opened a portal, but the other side was nothing except gray stone rubble. "No, it can't be," he stammered. "Going home? I am pretty sure that we hit that tower earlier today. Go, find your comrades and tell them the news. Lord Wistover is willing to give them a head start. If they can make it out of my territory fast enough, I will save them for last. The mage opened another portal, this time to a city with Dago's flags flying in the background, and ran. From the floor, the prisoner looked up in awe. I can't believe that you bluffed him like that. And it worked, he left. We're free, we can leave this place. Dominic smiled. It wasn't a bluff. I am Dominic Wavemates, Duke of Wistover. I have come here to scout for the armies eliminating the monster hordes that the mages have amassed. The last of their reserves will be gone by the end of the day. Upstairs, Dominic could hear cautious footsteps. Amy, bring the others inside. If the spells fell, then it should be safe to enter. I took care of things here, he shouted. Got it, boss. The barrier on the others fell a few minutes ago. But we didn't want to enter and put you in danger trying to save them. They've got a bunch more injured, she called back. That pretty much settled it, then. They would set the beacon, give their report to the armies, and then return home to recover. It was a shame to lose out on the loot, but they couldn't keep fighting when they had wounded to protect. They really should have insisted that there was someone with a healing spell with them, as the alchemist could only do so much. But without a church in Wistover, the number of healers was extremely limited. Minutes later, Dominic had 100 battered, abused and abandoned prisoners upstairs with the adventurers, and it was even more clear that their mission was over. The reports had been sent to Wistover, and the army had opened a large portal in the yard, ready to move troops through by the regiment. The other locations were in a similar state, with troops set to arrive within minutes. How did you get so many prisoners? They couldn't all fit in the basement, Bella asked, as the terrified prisoners stared at the adventurers. They were in dungeons linked to the room with portals. There were no other entrances to the dungeon they were kept in, so it had to be accessed with magic, but just to be safe, we should close the portal or put a landmine at the entrance. Dominic explained. That is inhumane, Bella noted. It's not our fault if intruders step on a poorly placed explosive. That's all on them. Wiz smirked. And on the walls and the roof. Bella slapped his arm, but the soldiers gathering nearby laughed at the berserker's sense of humor. The mages will take care of it before we leave. Send the wounded through first, and the Adventurers Guild will take care of them. They have a healer on staff. Then you can send the refugees out, and the army will take care of the trauma counseling. The officer insisted, which meant that they would investigate them all to be sure that there were no more hidden mages, spies, or traitors. But it was a necessary process. Gentlemen, help the wounded get to the guild house, and I will meet you there once my official duties end. I need to brief these lovely men of fortune on the situation, and what they might find. Dominic insisted. The adventurers laughed, as the soldiers were doing a terrible job of pretending that they were mercenaries. But Dominic was right. With a second mage team discovered where they shouldn't be, it was imperative that they informed everyone of the dangers. If the soldiers weren't aware that there might be mages in the houses, they could stumble across them and end up sacrificed or ambushed by summoned monsters. The team left through the portal, leaving only Amy and Dominic behind. Commander, there are a few important facts. There are mages hiding in some of the barony houses. We've cleared out multiple groups already. Inspect all of them as you pass. There are also portal targets in some of the monster camps, and they will be reversed to bring monsters back from a siege when the group is attacked. We had that issue with a camp of minotaurs that turned from 50 into 400 earlier today. The money was excellent with so many monster cores and the drops that they gave us, but you don't want to lose soldiers to insufficient deployment. Even if the group looks small, send more than you think you need, and prepare to send the rest. Our team had 4 members with rare weapons above level 20, and it was still a tough fight. We also had 3 master-level mages with us, and that was only enough to keep the defensive barriers up. Most of the time, 2 weren't even able to attack. I'm sure that there is more that I'm forgetting, but that's the essence of the issue. The commander nodded. I understand the situation. The princes have kept us updated on the developments as your mages called in. Do you know where Princess Alexis is? Dominic replied. Next beacon that way. The commander pointed back to the previous house they had marked by the minotaurs, and Amy tugged at Dominic's coat, making him laugh at her pleading look. Should we go visit my wife? I am certain that they are going to be doing something fun. Commander, does she have her usual team with her? The commander nodded. Indeed. She also has 100 cavalry with her. That would make it harder to keep up with them, but if they headed for the monster horde, they would intercept the cavalry on their way to battle. Thank you, Commander. I will go pass on the good news. See you back home after the mission is complete. Dominic replied, then jogged away with Amy at his side. The commander just shook his head. He could have kept the rest of the adventurers with him. Half the team wasn't injured. Let them go. The two sorcerers are better when they're not tied down to another group. I have met the Duskblade sect before, and that Amy is no normal mage. One of his officers explained. All right, I will make a note of it in case they go missing. But the chances that something out there can actually kill the Butcher of Westover seem pretty low. The commander laughed. A few of the other officers looked in their direction at the comment. They hadn't seen who was here, as Dominic had his hood up over a chainmail coif for battle. To them, it just looked like two short mages. With him in the area, as well as the forces from the other waypoints and the Royal Guard, the odds of being surrounded should be less likely than they had planned for. Get the troops moving the moment that the mages have cleared the house. I don't want to be hanging around here any longer than necessary. The other units will be headed for glory, and you know damned well that they're going to go for the best loot first. The officers laughed. That settled the deployment plan. Look at the options, pick the one that paid best, and do the other second. While they prepared to move, Dominic and Amy were jogging through overgrown fields and a thin stand of trees, headed for the edge of the horde. Alexis would have moved the moment that the area was secure, and they hadn't left anything alive at that manor house to hold her up. The horde came into sight before Alexis and her troops did, so Dominic didn't wait for them. The next group they came across was only a group of froggers, as the men of Westover called the species of amphibians with frog-like heads and webbed feet. They didn't belong out here in the open grasslands. The hard dead grass would hurt their feet, and their gills would dry out with no pond to sleep in. But they couldn't leave. They were being bound with magic to remain. They're so cute, Amy whispered as they saw the hapless monsters. We can skip them if you want. They're not fast on land. They won't catch up to us. Dominic suggested. She crouched low in the grass as she cast a spell, then shook her head. There is another portal beacon here. We need to get it and destroy it. They're not going to miss the fact that a full invasion has started. There is no need to spend the time to change the targets on this one. All right, stick to fire magic. They're already half dead from dehydration. Might as well make it fast. They moved swiftly, rushing through the long grass. Like goblins, these were level 1 monsters, not a high-value target. But Dominic needed lots of low-level cores to pay debts and workers with. The more that he could collect on this mission, the better. Fireball, imbued into the pistol shots, exploded among the Frogger crowd, and the monsters dropped by the dozen. They were so lethargic from being trapped out of water that they hardly even responded to the attack, and Dominic began to view this as an act of mercy. These poor creatures were suffering. You go look for the portal beacon, and I will clean up the monster cores. That's likely going to take longer than finishing off the Froggers did. It makes me wonder, though, did they summon at random? Or are they targeting somewhere in a swamp that would actually be a viable target for these guys? Calling them out here into the grass is a massive waste, and they couldn't have walked all the way here from the nearest swamp. Dominic noted. We will have to try to find out. They might have been brought here with a portal as well. Not summoned, but herded here by a mage with control magic. Amy suggested. Then, she turned to look at the ground. I found it. There is a portal beacon right under my feet. It won't take long for me to relocate it, and this time the monsters might not actually mind if they were sent through without anyone checking. For amphibians, being sent to the ocean, somewhere offshore and out of sight of land, was not the punishment that it was for other species. Perfect, so you can help me collect all these cores. I might need a bigger storage cube if we're going to be doing this all the time. So many little round things. Dominic joked. I think that is a good problem to have, isn't it? But you should have a safe or vault somewhere in the manor as well. You can put your valuables in it. Dominic thought about that for a moment. It made perfect sense, but they hadn't found one when they looked through the house. At least not one that wasn't the small personal safe in the office. The manor might actually hold a wealth of not just secrets but actual wealth. Good point. Money doesn't have to stay on me. I can put it in the house and trust that it will stay there. Or make it accessible to Alexis and Julio, since they do most of the actual spending anyhow. Amy laughed at his reluctant tone. It's not like you actually need the money. When was the last time that you bought something that wasn't work-related? I mean, have you ever? Even when it's work around the duchy, you have someone else take care of the money part while you either help with magic or study. She had a point. He really should make more of the wealth available to the ones who were paying the bills, so they didn't have to ask him for it when things needed done. But on the other hand, holding on to the money made sure that they did actually mention the spending to him. Not that he distrusted either of them, or thought that Alexis needed his money to do what she wanted. But it was nice to know that they were keeping him in the loop, at least peripherally. It was better than sitting in the meetings about how the money was being spent. He would refrain from mentioning that to Amy. She didn't know that the issues in his mind stemmed entirely from his reluctance to actually sit through meetings or do paperwork. With hundreds more level 1 monster cores in their possession, the duo made their way toward the spot where they expected to find Princess Alexis and her guards. Dominic's sensitive hearing could pick out fights from all over the monster horde as the army rolled in, but none of it was distinct enough that he could tell what force was fighting on their side. Some he could tell what sort of monster it was, though. Turn left. I hear ogres. Not bad to kill, and they pay very well. He instructed. I like the way that you think. Though you're wrong about the whole easy-to-kill part. Amy replied. Well, they are magic-resistant, but we've got some decent blades with us. I should likely make some rare-grade swords and spears to deal with ogres. But I keep getting distracted making guns. They're just so much more versatile. Dominic agreed. The mana revolvers did struggle against the ogres. But with their level this high and the rare grade, they should only need a few shots per ogre. Not more than 4 or 5. That was 1 reload per monster, so as long as they didn't get too enthusiastic, they could deal with ogres easily enough.